Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause the fan has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
Everyone here has a grandparent that they love. What if I told you that they were the targets of countless scams, infighting amongst families, and other things that they shouldn't have to deal with at that age? Well, Nelson Elder Care is here to make sure that them, their families, and all of their loved ones are taken care of. In this episode, we talk about how they market, how they reach the elderly, and how to make sure everybody lives their best life.
They say marketing is a madman's game. So now we turn it over to the marketing madman with Nick Constantino and Trip Job.
Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino here, and we got a great show. We're talking legal. We're talking the elderly. We got a lot to cover, so we're going to get right to it, and I'm going to introduce Josh Nelson, CEO and founder of Nelson Elder Care Law. Josh, how you doing, bud?
Doing amazing. So glad to be here. Marketing is one of the biggest things that helps us help more families, and excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, and you guys approach it very interestingly. A lot of people say they want to educate, but from what I've seen, you guys, the effort you put into it, it's part of marketing that is forgotten, right? To be out there, to be educating people. Most educate you because they're trying to trick you to buy something, right? Yeah. Educating people to really, look, we'll put it this way. My grandma just turned 99 years old, okay? I love my grandma, and she is badass. My grandma, she fell, she blew out a hip, and was in and out of the hospital in 24 hours. They did surgery on her hip, and she was walking within a week. She's 99 years old. They do not let
you stay there like they used to. Once you're in, you're out.
And she is an immigrant, and she does not want to be a burden on anybody. She still lives alone. She still gardens. She's nuts. I mean, in fact, there was a couple of months ago, she locked herself outside of her house, and instead of calling anybody, she went into her shed, got a ladder, and climbed in a window at 98 years old. So the point is that you look around, we all have grandparents. We all have elderly we're around. And, you know, right now, I am getting bombarded with fraudulent calls. I got one from the DeKalb sheriff's actual number that was a fraudulent line. And the only way I knew it is because when I wouldn't give my information, I was called some derogatory terms that no sheriff should be saying. Is the only way I knew this was a scam.
Why is the sheriff cussing at me?
And then I called the sheriff's office and I was like, hey, I just want to let you know this is happening. And I was so the nonchalant. It's like, oh, it's a scam. I go, ma'am, they're using your number. And it's a scam. So the point is, I can only imagine what's happening in the world of the elderly now and what they're dealing with and the target they are. So I think before we even get into the legal background, let's set the stage of what you guys do and how you guys help the elderly. Because again, I think we're heading to that time where they need help.
Well, so first, glad to hear your grandma's 99, but it's not just the elderly in that context. I do have 7 clients over 100, and hearing their stories, just like your grandmother's, is amazing. But it's just a type of law that describes people 55 and older. As we start to have different ailments and go through different care journeys, how do we plan for that? And it's not old estate planning that's wills and trusts and things like that. It's really looking at the person, hearing their story, and figuring out, where do we go from here? How do we make sure that Nick's taken care of? How do we make sure that Nick's grandmother is taken care of? Like you said, scams are on the absolute rise, and they're so sophisticated today compared to what they were before. It's not some foreign number. It's not just your phone saying scam.
So you're not a Nigerian prince? You're not a Nigerian prince.
I'm going to send you a check. I need you to cash it. Just send me some money back. It's going to work out fine for both of us. But I think that's the thing that we don't think about. And then you hear stories about people not wanting to lose their autonomy. So like you say, your grandmother going and actually grabbing a ladder to climb through a window before she's going to call a locksmith, because she has that nature and that fear of, oh my God, if I call my kids or my grandson and I say that I locked myself out, am I going to get put in a home? Like, I don't want people to know that I made this mistake. And that's really where we come in and help, is how do we have those conversations? How do we empower people to really live the lives they want to live?
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so now let's rewind. So talk about, first of all, getting into law school, getting into it, and then talk about the firm, because that'll set us up for the conversation to pull all this together.
Definitely a unique story. I used to run a race team for Dunlop Tires and the local company Maxxis Tires. Went through undergrad here at Kennesaw State. Got a degree in finance. Wasn't really the right time coming out of 2008 to have a degree in finance. Always wanted to go to law school, be a tax lawyer. Come to find out, my mom was working for Home Depot. She bet me she could beat me on the entrance exam. She did. We took it again just because I'll gamble on about anything. We both improved, got scholarships to law school. So me and my mom, Cindy Nelson, actually went to law school together. While we were there, I did tax law, got my master's in tax while I was in law school. But she worked for an elder law clinic that the school ran and started just dealing with all senior issues.
Wow.
So is the HOA trying to kick this senior out? Are they saying they can't have their bench or their American
Don't even start
flag?
with me on the HOAs. I'm going to do a whole HOA service show on how much I hate HOAs.
Well, it's so weird, but like the American flag for a senior veteran that fought in World War II that's fighting with his HOA that he can't have the American flag in his yard. And so she really just had a soft spot for them. Came out of law school. I did tax law. She did elder law. A little bit later, she started her own firm, and I came and joined. I met a veteran who was flying P-51s back in World War II. He got some really bad advice on taxes. Somebody told him just cash out his IRA.
All the same time.
Take the tax hit, pay $40,000 in tax, no big deal, and then go try and get a $20,000 benefit. And that was just stupid. And so my mom, Cindy, brought me in to kind of co-counsel on that thing, fell in love with helping veterans, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story. It's ironic. So I was a finance major, and I took my LSATs, and I was this close to going into law school. I don't know what clicked in my head. I didn't end up doing it, and I did pretty well. I would have been a tier 2 law school. It would have been it. I didn't end up doing it, but I was a finance degree, and I graduated in 2004. So I would have been entering, if I had done finance, the same time, where you just didn't want to be in finance.
So I graduated in 2013. Last year was my 10-year anniversary, and I am so amazed about how many people that even made it through the 3 years of law school who no longer practice. It is definitely not for everybody. Yeah. I think so many people get into it as, kind of the economy was down, I'll go get a master's or a law degree or something like that. But if you aren't really passionate about this, if you just don't have the drive to help people, there's not as much money in it as people hope. Right. And so they leave.
Right, and if there is money, most of the times you have to sell your soul to go find that money. I mean, like with most things, right?
Ambulance chasers, right? that's where we get a bad at.
There's a place for them, and some of them are really good, and some of them are really good marketers. But it is a crowded space. It is a convoluted and confusing space. So you specialize. So that's one thing that I think in most of these industries that differentiates. I'm not saying it's easy to market, but you specialize. Talk about what you specialize in. Talk about what your consultations are like. Talk about what your client base is like. Because I have to imagine that, like, my grandparents came from Italy on a boat and keep cash under a mattress, right? My grandfather was an 80-year-old security guard at a bank, and he still doesn't trust banks. Like, their relationship with money and with these things is different. So talk about what your clients are like and how much education is required to get them to a place where they're even comfortable with you.
I think that first you really hit it on the head and you kind of dismissed it, but it is easy whenever you have a niche. You got to first identify who your avatar is, and my avatar is not somebody that's out there 30 years old with new kids trying to figure out what happens if we get hit by a bus. Yeah. My avatar is people 55 and older that are starting to think about retirement. They don't want to worry about their money. They don't want to worry about their health. They really don't want to be a burden. A lot of times in elder law, we talk about asset protection, but really where we focused is how do we become a burden release? Yeah. How do we make it so that whenever your grandma does get where she can't live alone, she's not being that, kind of duty for your parents or you or whoever.
I bet you if you asked 20 people on the street, they would have no idea how much a funeral costs or how much those processes and everything cost. I bet you they would have no idea.
Almost everybody we meet, whenever we first meet them, has no idea how much like having somebody in your house costs, how much going to these beautiful assisted livings costs. Most people don't even know what a nursing home is, or the fact that it costs $8,000 to $10,000 a month. Yeah. Average retirement for people is $2,500. Yeah. How do you make up $7,500? Yeah. You come talk to people like us.
And pensions are gone. So that's going to even get worse when this next wave comes out and they realize that there's no pension there. Social Security is going to be diminished. 401ks would look averages. So it's going to get worse. So let's not be all doom and gloom.
Not all doom and gloom. But so back to your question of how do we market towards them, it's really just letting them know first that there's an option. So many people are afraid to even look at their bank accounts or do a budget. I've worked with congressmen, judges, financial advisors, other attorneys, and the reality is almost nobody really works on a budget. So your normal, grandmother, grandfather, they don't do it. A lot of times one spouse has been handling all the bills. If that spouse gets sick, the other one's just left in turmoil. They don't even know how much money they have, let alone how much they spend.
And or how much their house is worth. I mean, my grandma, they bought their house, I think, for like $12,000 because it was when World War II vets were settling in New York. You know what the house is worth now? It's a bungalow in Queens is worth $1.3 million.
Well, I'll tell you, my grandma's going to hate me, and I hope she doesn't hear this. But like whenever I go out to eat with my grandmother, I have to leave cash tip afterwards, because like even if she like demands she's going to pick up the meal, like it will be like, you know, like a $2 or $5 tip, and you don't want to like stiff the waitress, so you got to be laying down cash afterwards.
I do it with my father-in-law.
Yeah,
he's 76 and I'll do it. He's 86 and all the time before he turns around, I'm like, here's an extra $6, just take it, because he's still doing math on like 12%. And I'm like, yo, inflation's everywhere, dude, but you don't want to have that conversation.
And that's the thing, is you appreciate the gesture, but how do you make it work? And that's really what we do, is we figure out things to make the system work, things to make people's aging journey not feel burdenous to them.
Yeah, so I want to continue this after the break, but talk about how you would distinguish yourself or delineate yourself from a financial advisor. Because when you meet a financial advisor, like my parents would get to, and they're meeting with the state attorneys and they're meeting, but how do you distinguish? That's what a financial advisor can say, don't meet with him, meet with me, because I know how to beat the market and I know all this stuff. Now, right, like you said, they're never saying how to protect the family. They're just saying how to make you the most money so they make the most money. But how do you delineate yourself? And I bet you this will carry us through the break and we'll talk broadly about the industry, but how do you delineate yourself from a financial advisor?
1,000% different. So we don't do any actual money management. We don't have any kind of assets under management, which is how most financial advisors get paid. They're taking 1.5% of all your stuff every year. We work on a flat rate model. You come in, you pay me once, and that's all you got to do. We're big proponents of, if you do this once, there's no reoccurring fees, there's no ongoing. You know, the old estate planning model of you got to come back every 3 years and pay me money is just dumb. We know that seniors are on a fixed budget. We have very transparent flat rate pricing, and we're going to help you everything that you need to know to protect your money, not just build it, because it's not just how much you make, it's how much you keep. So taxes, keeping it free from medical costs, making sure that you qualify for any government benefits that are out there. That's really where our specialty is.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, I don't know if it's I've gotten older and paid more attention, but the laws around these things change almost every 6 months. It feels like there's a new RMD age changes, and like these things, they change so fast, and like they change, but they don't go into effect into now. So just keeping up with that stuff has to be exhausting.
Absolutely. One of the things that we find is, you know, I joke that what we do is truly Google proof, because it's mandated by not only your county, but your state and the federal government. So if you go Google something and you find out that nationwide there's been a change, you don't know how it really impacts Georgia. So how does Medicaid expansion impact Georgia residents and seniors? How do you qualify for different things to get Medicare waiver, so your insurance paid for cheaper? What kind of things do you need to avoid with your health insurance? What do you need to do with your taxes? Do you even need to file taxes? I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things for somebody like your grandmother is, like, is she still filing her taxes? Or
well, she probably wouldn't even know. My dad's been doing it for probably 50 years.
Years ago, somebody said, nah, you're good. She just ran with it. And then all of a sudden they do big tax law changes. And then they don't know if it's a scam call from the IRS or a scam letter.
Right. They wouldn't even know where to start. Yeah. And I think we'll pick up on that because you brought up a good point about how states and municipalities are so different. That's got to be exhausting. But you've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3, and we will be right back.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. Nick Constantino here with Josh Nelson, CEO of Nelson Elder Care Law. And you brought up a good point before the break. So one of the things that being about a lawyer, and I only know this because of like Zoom docs and like all these things, is one, so that's a lot. So we look over a lot of legal contracts. We have contracts with Georgia, the Braves, intellectual property, tailgates, lots. There's a lot of contracts I look over. And I'm just dumbfounded. One, most things are boilerplate, right? Until you start getting into how the law is applicable to the state and then the county and then where laws change. And then you're governed by this here and governed by this here. So I have to imagine Atlanta's a big area, the metro area. You can go from a pretty blue-leaning area to a pretty red-leaning area fast. You can go from Cobb, which is super developed, to Cherokee, which is super not. Like, does that make it more difficult where people live and keeping up with the legalities there?
It absolutely does. And I think that most lawyers are just idiots whenever it comes to this concept.
Let's rewind that part.
I'm like one of the few lawyers that doesn't love lawyers. I understand why we have the reputation we do. But I think that sometimes, especially like estate planning attorneys that try and dabble in elder law, try and do marketing to persuade people that they print paper better than they do. Like, that's so stupid. Like you said, LegalZoom, I can go on LegalZoom with the knowledge that I have and make a great estate plan.
Yeah.
And anybody that tells you otherwise is an idiot.
Yeah.
They're trying to scam you in some way. Especially in Georgia, our legislature is so cool that they give you a power of attorney, which like helps people help you with finances, or an advanced healthcare directive, which is like a power of attorney over medical decisions, for absolutely free. And there are attorneys out there, the ones that are just like the lowest of the low, trying to sell these free tools to people for hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
And that's a big thing, right? I know, like in New York, it is almost impossible to be granted power of attorney. I have a brother who's been going through some stuff his whole life. One of the easiest ways to help would have been to grant power of attorney to stop him from being able to check himself out of rehabs and stuff. And it is near impossible in New York to gain power of attorney. They want you just caught up in the legal system. And again, that's where the bureaucracy is, right? There's a lawyer that you have to be assigned to. You're charging the lawyer. It's going to cost you $50,000 to get power of attorney, which is something you should be the privilege to very easily.
Yeah, and it's really crazy. So like down here in Georgia, if somebody doesn't have the pre-plan done, we do what's called a guardianship, which is over the body, or a conservatorship over the money.
Just ask Brittany.
Those are easily $10,000+ cases, especially if there's any fighting going on, because you're going in front of a judge. People are getting their rights taken away from them. But the fact that you can skip all that for absolutely free breaks my heart that people don't know that. And so whenever we start working with people in different cities or counties, where we add value isn't in the fact that I print paper better than you. It's the fact that I know what to put on the paper. It's that whenever we print that paper, I know that I don't need to give your son a paper copy of your power of attorney or your advanced healthcare directive. He needs to have that as a PDF that's going to be on his phone, so that if you get in a car accident or you have a fall,
it's right there.
Whenever he rushes to the hospital and they say, hey, do you have this? He pulls it up in his Gmail account, and all of a sudden you're not longer worrying about where are the originals, where are the originals?
And that's a big point now, because hospitals have more lawyers and they're more worried about getting sued, and then the insurance companies get involved. I mean, it's just a chain.
The funny thing is that's all lawyers' faults, right? That's like why people hate lawyers.
That's how you get billable hours, dude. Come on, I know how the game works. Yeah, it's an unbelievable thing when you just watch the bureaucracy spread, and you watch, like, it started probably harmlessly. There were a couple of lawyers doing this. Now it's just this web of interconnected legality that it's just billable hours here, and sometimes it's self-fulfilling, right? Like they leave the contracts vague so that someone else has to interpret the vagueness of said contract.
Well, and so like even with power of attorneys, one of the things that confuses people is at the end of every power of attorney, it usually says, and all other legal things, which makes a normal person think like, well, I can do whatever I need to for Nana, right?
Right.
But then whenever
all other legal things,
and then all of a sudden you walk into Truist or you walk into your local bank and you're trying to like help her pay a bill, or you're trying to get some money out to buy a car or whatever. And they're like, Nick, you can't do this for her. There's no way that you have the power. And you're like, well, right here it says, and all other legal things. And they're like, that's not what that means, which is so crazy that it's not written in normal English.
Yeah, and I think, I've learned this from working with AI, and I think this is applicable anywhere, right? It is not about the output, okay? So LegalZoom is giving you a piece of paper, like I said, but the more you know and can input to it, the better your output is going to be. As a lawyer, your job is not to give the piece of paper, it's put all of the right things, the inputs that make the piece of paper. AI can probably do a lot of this stuff.
So I think AI is going to clean the clock of most attorneys. It really just is, because most attorneys are in the document preparation. Even what you're saying, I would challenge as not being true what's best on paper, because AI is going to do that. AI is going to read hundreds of thousands of versions of powers of attorney, and they're going to kick out a pretty freaking decent one. Where I feel like the attorney's best job is as the advisor, just because you have that piece of paper in front of you, how do I make sure that you understand it? How do I make sure that whoever's going to help you understands it, so that whenever life throws you a curveball, you're actually there prepared, not just being like, I think I got that in my safety deposit box. I don't know what it does.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that the attorney's role is going to shift drastically over the next 3 years.
So it's going to be a relationship business. It's going to be a rapport build. You're not going to be just a shadow behind the Oz behind the curtain. You're going to actually be someone who's got to be able to get reached on phone. I know my father has an attorney named Merge. I don't know what the hell he does. I've never actually interacted with him legally, but I've met him before. Yeah. But it's like, I'll just ask Merge. I'm like, who the heck is this Merge guy?
Well, and I think that's where like so much of it comes from, is really where I'd love to get kind of my 3-year goal is, how do I give away the legal stuff for free and just be there as an advisor, be there as a true counselor, the way attorneys really started back 200 years ago, so that if something does happen to your dad and you call up, I'm like, hey, I got you. And I think that's the part where most attorneys are going to get left behind.
No, they're going to spend 25 minutes actually just asking, who is this again? So they can bill the hours back for that. Oh, sorry, I have a bad connection. What was your name?
Yeah. We're rolling out like a portal to give everybody case status of where they're at with everything. Even the kids are going to have a way to be able to text in. If it's an emergency, you can call 24/7. And that's going to be right on everybody's phone. And that's the kind of thing that's going to create those relationships that add value.
It's amazing.
I think the people that are trying to compete on my paper is better than your paper are going to die every day.
So let's set up a marketing conversation because I think this is a good segue. So in Atlanta, how many real competitors would you say you have that are doing business like you? And how many competitors do you think you have that are doing business either the wrong way or a different version of what you're doing? Is this in the thousands? What would you say competitor-wise?
When we started 10 years ago, there were maybe 3 people who really did elder law well. And over those 10 years, it has flourished. And unfortunately, it's because a lot of people are trying to take advantage of seniors. You know, it's the old quote, why do people rob banks? Because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
That's where people are trying to go for seniors. Get at this baby boomers in their retirement. So if you pull up elder lawyer right now, there's hundreds of them in Metro Atlanta. There are 5 that I would trust my family to.
Okay.
There's one in Decatur. There's one in Alpharetta. So we don't
So
have...
if you're saying Decatur, you're saying community-based realistically. If you're saying that it's Decatur and he's attached to Decatur, so it's a community-based kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you're really looking for... Most seniors aren't going to drive more than about 12 miles to get somewhere, right? So if you think about like...
Let's hope they don't. At least the ones I've been around.
Like if you think about, you know, your 99-year-old grandma, if she's still driving, which I've had a 103-year-old still drive... a tangent, but Georgia DMV or DDS will continue to give you your license until you're well over 100 if you can pass the vision test. That's one of the biggest conversations that we help people navigate, again, because it's not about the paper, is how do we make sure that she's safe? How do we make sure that she doesn't have some cognitive impairment where she's getting lost in Alabama and all of a sudden...
Yeah, and it's a big problem. You know why it's a big problem? Because rush hour coincides with the exact time that the Golden Corral has their senior time special. So when you're in rush hour, you have all these... And my grandfather, he drive to, was old. My father-in-law, 50 and a 65. God bless him. I don't ever want to take that mobility away. Just don't be on the road in rush hour. Just go out on the road when there's nobody there, for the love of goodness.
Well, and then the problem...
That is not a legal statement, by the way.
The problem with so much of the growth of people saying they do this is people don't know how to verify.
Yeah.
So even yesterday, I had a marketer that was meeting a referral partner over at a Starbucks, and she overheard a senior couple talking to a guy that's just wearing a T-shirt in the middle of Starbucks talking about their will and their trust, and like, that's so scary. You don't have the confidentiality. Those people are my most fearful people, because what happens is they have the paper in their hand and they have the confidence of having a plan, but they have
a plan. They have a plan just to have one.
Yeah.
Someone told them they have to have a plan, so they have a plan. They don't know how to execute it. They don't have a liaison or a confidant to help them walk through it. Yeah. Someone told, oh my God, this happened to me, you need a plan. So they made a plan. That's the end of it.
Well, and especially if the guy doesn't even have an office. Like, what happens if he changes his business, right? So all of a sudden he figures out he can't hack it as a lawyer without an office.
Yeah.
Who are
the
they going to
T-shirt's
call?
Not a good starting sign.
Who are they going to call whenever something goes wrong? You know,
Yeah.
What happens if you go to a firm that only has one lawyer and that lawyer decides to be a judge? Like, they can't help you then. Like, what's going to go on? And so that's really where there's about 5 people around Atlanta that I would call competition, but there's literally hundreds of people that say they do what we do.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like this is one of those examples where it lends itself well to content marketing, storytelling, content creation, education. And it's really hard, right? Because you are at a good heartedness trying to be an educator, while there are people trying to just capture the lowest buck or outbid you, or now all of a sudden you're doing a great job. So they're coming in and they're stealing your clicks on Google. So talk about how you approach your marketing, that storytelling, and talk about where you've seen success and where you've seen other people who are doing things a different way maybe get an advantage some places.
I think whenever I look at what's going on, first, the education is always the foundation, especially whenever you have a service-based industry and people don't quite understand it. So a big part of our marketing is we have to start with what's the problem, helping people identify that, figure out what their pain points are for that problem, and then figure out what solutions are possibly there for them to choose.
How often do you have people not know what their problems are? Because one of the things in life you always find out, right, is people may think they know, but it takes probing to find out what the real root of the problem is.
I would say recently the internet has helped, and some of our marketing has definitely helped. By the time they call, they've usually sent content where they have at least half of them have a good understanding.
That means the marketing worthwhile just in that sense. If they're educated more and they're calling you with a basis of education, that means what you're doing is working.
Absolutely. But the biggest thing is most people get their paychecks and they see Medicare taken out of their paychecks, and they assume Medicare is going to cover everything whenever they get old. I would say over 80% of the people that call in think that Medicare is just something that's going to cover whatever you need health-wise whenever you turn 65. And that's just a big misnomer. And the bigger part of that is there's a program called Medicaid, which is a government benefit service, And even people in the industry get them mixed up because Medicare and Medicaid are spelled so similarly.
Sure.
They can't really differentiate. So what we found is story-based marketing, telling people really stories about this person was in this situation. They came in because of their mom, or they came in because of their spouse, they came in because of themselves. But really importantly, making sure that we're telling how they're the hero of the story, not how Nelson Eldercare Law or Josh is the hero of the story, because nobody cares. We're the largest in the state that does what we do, and we don't market that at all because I don't think people care about it. It gives us the ability to be there. We're large enough that if something happens, we're a resource for them. But I don't think anybody goes in and is like, I need to get my estate plan done, or I want to talk to an elder law attorney.
No.
I just want the biggest. And so what we do is try and say, how does this daughter free herself by getting a plan for her mom that makes it so that maybe she moves in right now with them, but they have a plan so that if that doesn't work, she can go somewhere else.
And she knows how much it costs. You have those things laid out and you have an understanding. You're not just going into it winging it.
Yeah, my team hates it because I always do math. Like, I'm just a big math
I've been doing
person.
it in my head too.
It's the kind of thing, like, if you really look at a budget, like say an assisted living is $5,000 a month, that's $60,000 a year. People look at that as, how the heck am I going to spend $60,000 a year? Well, then you look at it and say, okay, well, you actually have $3,000 a month in income, so that's 36. Now all of a sudden, we're just over $20,000 a year. You got, $200,000. You got 10 years worth of money, and you're 93. I think you're okay. Like, those are the conversations that people aren't going to have without the math. And again, nobody lives on a budget, so just being able to explain that, especially with things like Medicaid, a lot of times we're able to get people 24/7 care and save between 85, 90, sometimes even 100% of their assets.
Wow.
And that's the kind of thing that people just don't even know that's an option. So what happens a lot is whenever your parent goes to a community like a nursing home and it's $7,000, $8,000 a month, the business office is not your best friend. They're going to tell you, hey, let's apply for this benefit. They purposely apply, get you a denial letter, and just say, keep paying us till you're broke, and then we'll reapply. And then people don't even look for us because they've seen something on state letterhead that says you don't qualify. Where if we can get the right content to them, they actually could save 100% of what they worked their entire lives for.
And time, because now you're not reapplying. You're saving time, money, everything.
Well, and the stress. I mean,
and the stress on your kids. And
you think dealing with the DMV is bad or the IRS is bad. Imagine an underfunded state represented entity. So just this morning before we came in, we had a guy that was like, how do I make my mom the ward of the state? And we had to explain to him the department that handles that has 35 staff total. They do not take people as wards of the state. They're under-resourced. They have 900 wards in the entire state of Georgia. Not 900 a year, 900 total. You can't just call up and say, hey, I don't want to deal with Nana or Mom or whoever. Can you take it over? Like, that's not an option.
That's insane. So I know what we're gonna do our last segment on now. We're gonna say why is this all broken and how do we fix it? Because first of all, how you have to do marketing for the government because they were so stupid to name Medicare and Medicaid the same thing and confuse everybody and do no marketing of their own to actually give people a service in which we are paying for is crazy. All of this is crazy. You talk about content marketing. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about where you're reaching people. Talk about when they're coming in. Are they saying they saw it? Are you doing outreach? Are you reaching people who are already in the funnel? Talk about how you use this because I think this is a good lesson for a lot of people. It is a very misused thing, content marketing. What most people do is they think standing up and putting a YouTube video drawing on about the product or service they do is content marketing. Well, let me tell you, one's going to, you did it.
I did that. It didn't work.
It didn't work because there's no active, I joke with people all the time. Everyone's like, we have to make a video. I go, okay, you spend $20,000 making a video, put all this time. I go, who's going to watch your video? And they don't understand that it just doesn't work that way. You don't just put something onto the ether and just pray that it's going to be watched. So talk about how you do your content marketing.
I think the biggest thing that people forget is whenever you're making a piece of content, you're 80% done by the time you turn the camera on. You better have put input into what you're trying to actually educate somebody on, who you're trying to reach, what kind of thumbnail, what kind of tag. Where are you going to put this thing so that it adds value? Because you can easily get kind of scammed into spending way too much money on production. And then you look at your video afterwards and you're like, how do we cut this thing together in a way that's not just dumb? And so making sure you have a plan, making sure you have a real shoot list, making sure that you're coming with a hypothesis of how is this going to help my end user? How is this going to educate them? How is this going to give them value? Especially now, there's so much content being put up. If it doesn't add value, if you're not really giving people actionable stuff, don't play hide the ball. 10 years ago, you could put an ad up there like the Frank Kern method where you're trying to like hide, be like, you got to click here, download here, even ClickFunnels, is based up in Canton. The problem with even what they do is people don't want to go find it anymore. You got to give people actively that value, give people the story, let them know how it impacts them.
And not only that, but you have to play in the parameters that Google and Facebook and Instagram set up, right? One of this is SEO, is like you may think you say everything. Are you tagging it the right way? Are you keyword? Are you summarizing it? Is it transcribing? Because one of the things when you look at SEO, right, these are buzzwords. These are things people are talking about now. They may not have been as much 10 years ago. That's a good thing. But does your video actually say that? Are you saying the buzzwords? And one of the things I found is this is where AI can really help, because you could say, here's a topic, give me some talking points and some keywords that I should say, and you could preemptively do that. Most people are doing it after the fact. You could preemptively do that.
I would say even once you get the AI version, make sure that somebody that's not in your company or not in your like field of practice or business is looking to it too, because you might have curse of knowledge.
Yeah.
So like nobody searches Medicaid lawyer. But for so long as an attorney, we're going to try and go target those words. We're going to try and do that.
Right.
Well, that's just dumb. And you put it into AI, and AI is like, you're an idiot. Don't use that word. But then sometimes
AI calls me an idiot all the time also. It's unbelievable. I'm sitting there, I thought it was whimsical. It's like, nope, you're dumb.
But so then also just going in front of people, right? Like actually getting in front of people that are kind of part of, they've worked with you in the past. They're happy with what you're doing. Go buy them lunch and say, hey, can I show you a couple of things? What do you want? What would make you buy? Doing that research. So many people just want to do the content because content's uncomfortable. People don't like being in front of video, and they finally get that down, and then they realize this is 10% of the work. You got to go do the research. You got to go make sure that it's planned out well. Talking with people that are going to be the end users, people that had great success with you in the past. Even things like just asking them, right? So Google loves Google reviews, and everybody's excited whenever they get 100. 100 is nothing.
Yeah.
We had to work really, really hard to get each one of our offices over 1,000 Google reviews. And it's no easy task, but once you do it, everything else gets easier.
That's critical mass. They want you to get to critical mass to show your real value, and once you do, Google really helps. That's what I found. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time, sometimes a lot of money to get there. But once you get there and those mechanisms kick, they're there to benefit you. And I think, to be honest with you, it's a weeding out process, because what you don't want is some guy who starts up on a Tuesday and then, because look, you can juice the system. Let's be honest. I get emails all the time. Do you want to remove your negative reviews? And it's like, wait a second. Then what's the point of this all? What's the point if I can just pay you to remove what's the point of this all? And that's the problem with the internet world. Everything, they figure out how to monetize everything. Everyone's got their hands out for a cut. Back in the day when you were a radio station, you were not removing negative reviews, right? You accidentally had an on-air guy that was like, they suck. Oops. And like, that's a negative review. But nowadays you can remove. So how do you stay ahead of it? And how do you know that you have to get to 1,000 reviews? You started a new business. How are you learning that stuff? And what advice could you give to people, not necessarily in the same field, but how you storytell, how you get to critical mass? Because you guys have done a great job at it, and sometimes it's better to hear from the horse's mouth.
I think the biggest thing is be a constant learner. You have to go work with the people, model the people that are already where you're at. If you want to go get 1,000 Google reviews, don't go ask a bunch of people that have 100. Go ask some guy that's got 5,000 or 10,000 and say, what'd you do? Because they're so far advanced of where you're at that point in your marketing expertise that it's going to be like a fifth grader teaching a kindergartner how to do addition. They got that thing packed. Now, they might not be a college level professor still, but they're going to be able to help you get where you are. If you want to go set up a podcast room or you want to go shoot content, go to the people that have already done it. Find somebody a couple steps before you. Everybody that you meet is so excited to help you. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that especially marketers and entrepreneurs and small business owners don't realize is pick up the phone, talk to somebody. Nobody, if you're really going to follow through on what you're trying to learn, is going to be like, Nick, I don't have time for you.
Yeah.
If they do say that.
They may expect a favor later.
Yeah, but I mean, your net worth is entirely relational to your network is one of my favorite quotes. And that's really where the marketing helps. How do you go find people that are in your area that you can jump on with and they can walk you through something? If you're having a problem with microphones, you can watch YouTube, you can figure it out, or you can find somebody in your area that's an expert, have them over, buy lunch, Get everything lined up.
Dude, is why I do the show. I mean, I'm personally 100 episodes in. The show is 150, and I've had 80 guests, 90 guests that have come on, and I've asked questions to learn about the business, right? We'll get to marketing. Like, at some point, it all comes back to marketing, but 45 minutes of marketing bores me. Like, these things exist, and I think it's a really good piece of advice, right? You don't need to go to Joe Rogan, right? If you're trying to do a podcast, don't go to Joe Rogan, right? You're not going to do a 4-hour podcast with hundreds of millions. It's just not going to happen.
He's going to tell you he doesn't have time.
But the trick is go to somebody who's gotten past 100 episodes, right? Because 100 episodes, just like 1,000 reviews, is that critical mass where the system's like, all right, this person's really serious about it. If somebody got to 25 and you're going, how do you do a podcast? You're asking the wrong people. I remember one of our staff, they had someone, he's like, hey, I know these 2 women, they do this podcast. Can you help them? So they sat with me, and I was like, you do what? How many people? What do you think this is worth? Are you guys crazy? And they'd only talk to people who were doing 5-6 episodes of a podcast. And all they thought was it was going to be worth $1 billion. I was like, you guys are out of your mind. Let me show you how this really works. Here are numbers. Here's stats. Here's what we do. Let me show you how this really works. And they went away so defeated, but so thankful and so grateful that they're not wasting their time to some fallacy that someone else led them to believe.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things, especially with like the coaching industry that's popped up. Is everybody wants $10,000 to teach you how to do something. And the reality is a lot of times they're just charlatans. They're just trying to say, I've cracked the code. I've gotten 30 clients. And you're like,
it's a pyramid scheme. It's a pyramid scheme. It funnels its way down. It starts with the Gary V's of the world that have this great strategy that killed LinkedIn just when it came out about, and it funnels its way down. They keep passing this knowledge down. And all I want to ask is, hey, how do you trick people into doing what you do? Don't give me the trick. I want to know how you trick people so easily because it's insane.
It's like, the easiest way to make money is to sell a business opportunity, right? And so I think there's so many people out in marketing that are trying to do that. Make sure before you're paying somebody even like $1,000 or $5,000 that you know how to track that that's actually good. I mean, even whenever I was getting started, we wasted so much money on just like scam style SEO or people that sell you vanity metrics. They're like, I can get you this many followers, and then all of a sudden you do a test and all your followers are over in like Europe or India, and you're like,
if you're lucky.
Like, I don't think they're going to buy anything.
I don't think that Azerbaijani prince is buying my service. But you bring up a great point, and I think it's one of the arguments, and I don't want to say arguments, but like there is value, and anyone should be in digital marketing. You should be doing SEO, but you should know enough to be dangerous and not someone else telling you what's going on. SEO is, we used to actually tell people before I started here, like, don't do SEO, only do radio. I'm like, you guys are nuts, because if they search you and they can't find you, the radio is worthless. These things all have to work in conjunction, right? You could ask, and I know you guys use Haibu and Jeff Mironov. Jeff and I get along so well because Jeff is like, no, do radio. It makes me look better. Because if you see 3 ads and you heard your name in advance, you're going to click on one of those ads, but they're not going to tell you that the radio boosted it because they want to make their own bottom line. It's a constant theme of the show that these things just don't work together. Before we continue this, because we're going to finish this one and then we're going to talk about what's really wrong with the world. We're going to go to a quick break. This has been a great conversation with Josh Nelson. We'll be right back on the Marketing Madmen.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino here, finishing up a conversation with Josh Nelson of Nelson Elder Care Law. And so, Josh, we talked a little bit about what's broken here, right? And, there's a lot of problems everywhere. And, there's a lot of books and a lot of stuff I'm reading that the empire has just gotten too big. As a country, we're on, no matter what, we found our 200-year cycle. We're cycling down. We've gotten too big. We can't fight enough wars to keep everything. Everyone's fighting over the same money. What is going on? Why is it so hard for people who have for the longest time been so respected by society, our seniors, our parents? Why is it so hard for them to do the things in which you're out there helping to do?
I think the biggest thing is the lack of education, but also just the fact that things are changing. So, back in the 1970s, people had pensions and companies were failing. And whenever your company failed, you lost your pension, because if the company couldn't fail your pension, you didn't have your retirement. You could have worked 40 years. The day you retire, you're so happy. You got $6,000 a month coming in, and then the company goes bust 2 days later, and you lost everything. And that was a real problem. So instead, our government decided, let's go ahead and sell you the idea that you can control your money. You can make your retirement portable. So if you work for GPC for 20 years and you put your money into a 401k, whenever you move over to Home Depot, you can take that money with you, and you know more about your risk tolerance and you know more about your money. So you should be the one managing it. And come to find out, most of us are pretty garbage about financial investing. We're just playing in a system that we're outsmarted, we're outgamed. The computers, the AI, the smartest guys in the world are playing in that arena and beating us.
Well, the only counterpoint I would say, or we think we're too clever and we try to do too much. Because one of the things about cost averaging in 401k is just let it freaking go, man. Just put a tolerance, decide your risk tolerance, and just let it go. I've seen too many people that are rebalancing and trying to do all this stuff, and all they do is screw themselves. So I think that like most things, that Goldilocks is the right.
I think one of the things that we see too, especially with seniors, is they've been through so many hard cycles. They've seen so many people go broke doing the wrong thing, that we actually find whenever we do a deep dive into a lot of people's accounts, they have hundreds of thousands of dollars in a 401k or in an IRA in a cash account. Yeah. And they don't realize that they're losing money by inflation every single year, that if they would have really gotten an advisor, if they really would have gotten somebody to walk them through it, they'd be better off in some kind of small, index fund or whatever. But whenever you start talking about people that are just scared. I deal with people that lived through the Depression, lived through World War II. A lot of us don't remember that right after World War II, our country was in shambles. I mean, people were having to move states to find jobs because whenever women became, such a major influence in the workplace and we ramped up for the war effort, whenever all of that manufacturing stopped, there weren't jobs. So guys that were coming back by the millions were unemployed. And that's really where these people got this idea of saving. Things were cheaper. We started doing a bunch of financing. There's a bunch of debt problems that we run into.
But that doesn't feed capitalism, right? People not working and spending. Now it's you need a new TV every. TVs used to be made to last for 20 years. Now you need a TV for some reason every 6 months. You go, oh my God, there's a new one. I need a new one, and we're taught that. We're putting everything on credit because the government just puts everything on credit. So who cares? But we're the reserve currency now, right? That doesn't mean we're going to be the reserve currency in 50 years. That all that debt can balloon at some point.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest issues is how do you time it, right? So it's like, when do you get out? A big issue is that people thought they were going to have enough money, and so we took better care of our kids than what their parents took care of them. So, I mean, how many people do you know that are our age and have a 35-year-old kid, like, living on their couch? Like, that wasn't a thing for that generation. It was like, oh, you're 17? Like, I think you're ready to go by yourself.
If not, you're going to the Army. If not, you're going to the freaking Army. If you can't figure this out, if you're not married by 18, you're going to the Army. Just get out of my house.
And then one of the problems is we have so many people who need to earn a living wage in these roles that may not have necessarily been designed to be lifelong living wage roles, that raise the cost. Yeah. So unfortunately, care has gone up just the same way like tuition has.
But that's the same thing for infants and for children too. Like, you look at both sides of this, right? You have those middle-aged earners that now are having to take care of young children because now it's two families, two parents have to work, young children, and then seniors. Well, the burden just all falls on them. That didn't used to be the case. There used to be communities of raising people.
But it's ultimately good because we're living longer. The problem is we just aren't good at financing those extra years yet. Because it's not just about length of life, it's about quality of life. And what we're finding is that a lot of people have more years. Those years can be better years, but especially the expensive years, the ones where we need an aide, we need a nurse, we need to live in an assisted living, unfortunately are quite a bit more expensive than any generation before us has seen. And so there's some great programs, there's some great planning that you can do to avoid that. But if you wait until you're too late, you're in a crisis, and whenever you're in a crisis, it's just expensive.
Yeah, like a HSA is a great example, right? Tax savings on the upfront. I mean, I know you got to be in a high deductible plan, but I tell people all the time, like, look, this is a mutual fund. I'm not saying use the money now. I'm saying if you know that 10% of your future is going to be health costs, and you can offload 8% of that by putting money away now, do it.
Well, even things like long-term care insurance. So long-term care insurance is a weird industry right now because they priced it wrong in the early 2000s. And so a lot of the big players, Genworth, John Hancock, all these guys are no longer even in the industry. But if you're between 35 and 55, you can get a long-term care insurance policy that will give you usually a 12x multiplier as a reasonable rate of health that you put money in now. Whenever you need it later, if you need somebody to come in your house, you need to go to an assisted living, whatever, it helps you save your autonomy.
Yeah.
In the way
so what's it betting against that you won't need that? Because insurance has to bet against something. So it's betting against that you're not going to need that. So
Correct.
If you're healthy,
you're thinking die before you get care.
Got it. Okay.
So like instead of underwriting for things like stroke risks, life insurance knows that you just need to make it past this certain period for term life.
You're not going to healthcare if you have a heart attack. Like so it's really playing the numbers again on what percentage of people, and it just got it wrong probably because it was a new industry.
Like they're hoping you have a heart attack that's fatal rather than blow out a hip. Like that's really
look at that. Good for you, insurance industry.
That's what their argument is. Because if you blow out a knee, you blow out a hip, that's whenever you really need somebody to come in and help with bathing and things like that, getting around your house. But you can get that really cheap, 35 to 55.
Right.
People don't start thinking about it until you're thinking about retirement. Most of us don't think about retirement until after age 60.
It's going to get later, bud. It's going to get later, too.
At age 60, you already got something going on, especially with so many people being pre-diabetic, so many people with high blood pressure. Those are the kind of things that are going to keep you from being underwritable for long-term care insurance at a rate that makes sense.
Sure.
And then just because people hear it's a good idea, like what I said, they don't do the math on what the multiplier is. So they get these stupid policies that have like a 2x multiplier. Like you put in $100,000, you get $200,000. That's not the kind of insurance you need.
No, especially because if you put that $100,000 in an actual cash bearing account or any kind of account paying interest, compounding interest would have surpassed that multiplier a long time.
And then one of the biggest things that people always say, which is just silly, is, well, what if I don't get sick? And the real answer is, like, it's like your homeowner's insurance or your car insurance. You don't get mad every year whenever you pay your homeowner's insurance. You're like, man, my water heater didn't flood my house or my house didn't burn down. But they've even designed policies now where you have a death benefit. So if you don't use it, your family can get some of the death benefit. The problem then, though, is you're hacking away at that multiplier. Yeah. And so that gets really scary again, is are you getting suckered into a plan that doesn't make sense for you?
That being said, I also know why people don't trust insurance agencies. You talk about lawyers. I know why people don't trust insurance. Insurance is never there for you when you need it unless they're collecting the check for their insurance.
Well, and so that's what's really cool is ethically, I cannot sell any kind of insurance. I can't get any kind of kickbacks. So whenever I talk about these programs with people, I have zero kickback, zero skin in the game.
So you pre-vetted them, and that's good.
So like I can sit there with you and the person that's trying to sell you this thing and be like, that's dumb. And most people can't do that because every insurance agent's trying to sell you insurance. They get commissions, and some of them are massive. I really, really hate like the annuity salespeople that come in and they just got like a $12K kicker off of like a $200,000 policy, and they're like, well, the 83-year-old grandma in 14 years you can touch your money. You're like, when she's 97, like, this is dumb.
Yeah, and there's no protections there. It's a shame. But look, you've done a damn good job of selling what you guys do and making sure people know. So let everyone know how to find you.
Josh Nelson from Nelson Elder Care Law. You can find us on any of the socials at Nelson Elder Care Law, NelsonElderCareLaw.com. We're a very southern, down-to-earth, family-run company. We do a lot of stuff in person. One of the things that we're really piloting and doing well with right now, though, is actually being able to do people that are still working. This full estate plan, elder law plan, where we can do it virtually. You don't even have to come in the office if you don't have the time or the mobility to do that. And I mean, we can even send people out to you to get the paperwork signed where you're at. So making it super easy, removing as many of the friction points as you can, really just helping people protect their loved ones.
Yeah, I love it. And you guys just started an advertising campaign with us on Extra, so you're going to be hearing a lot from these guys. So give them a call. It's a consultation. Like you said, he's not making kickbacks from anybody. He's there to help. Listen, follow the stories. Josh, thank you for coming. You've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. We'll catch you next week.
Every 3 minutes, a person in the U.S. is diagnosed with a blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma, blood cancers that often require patients to endure difficult treatments that leave them feeling weak, cold, and isolated. Subaru of Gwinnett is here to help. Since 2016, Subaru has partnered with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a cause that FAN has been proud to support for over 24 years. And in the month of June, through our Subaru Loves to Care initiative, we're continuing our partnership with LLS to give even more to patients and their families. Subaru, more than a car company. Visit SubaruofGwinnett.com to learn more.
A lifetime of hard work, children laughing in the kitchen, family photos on a restaurant wall, a legacy that lives on. It all comes from the power of a conversation, like the one Tommy Hall had with First Horizon Bank about taking over his father's Charleston-based restaurant business. Now the table is set for a whole new generation. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Tommy. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
Marketing is everywhere. From the billboards on the highways to the notifications on your phone, we are constantly bombarded with people trying to sell us stuff. What makes good marketing? Are you doing enough in your life personally and professionally to market yourself? You have questions, and the Marketing Madmen have answers. Search the Marketing Madmen on Google or your favorite podcast provider to get practical marketing advice from expert guests who are shaping and reshaping the business world. They say marketing is a madman's game. Join the Marketing Madmen every Saturday at 4 p.m. to find out why.